Well, welcome everybody to Auto Engineering, and I'm Jack Roser, of course, and we're here mainly because Steve Moore has found that we've been the living opposition to what Obama has to say about entrepreneurs or small businessmen, and Auto Engineering, myself, my son, all the employees here are living in evidence that the chance takers of the regular economy, we Americans that are living by the American dream, we don't want the interference from the president and all of those rule makers. They're sitting in Liberty Hall, used to be part of the old Illinois Iron and Bolt Company. And this was kind of a dirty room when we bought the place because they used it for heat treating the parts that went on plows. But the whole business, this whole building has gone through a big restoration. And I can tell you that when I started this business in Morton Grove just over 50 years ago, I could have had a loan of some sort from the Small Business Administration. When I looked at what they wanted to do, I decided too much interference and too much time would go by, not worth doing. So we did just a good old American gut out. And this thing has grown into 600 people and about $100 million a year business, a vertical business operating here in Kane County. Vertically, we do all of the different parts of manufacturing here on site. So that's a story that Steve Moore found interesting, and the Wall Street Journal, where he's written many articles, and he's been in Illinois giving speeches. He's much in demand everywhere because he's bringing a message about economics and entrepreneurs and business and its place here in the United States. There's other folks here. I don't think I'm going to introduce the whole table, but I did originally mention Debbie Gordel's because this woman, on her own and with a little bit of help from me, started some political offices in the city of Chicago. And that takes a lot of guts to do, to admit you're a Republican there. So there's that. Carol Ann is at the other table back there. Carol Ann Parisi is the lady that runs our radio program on Sunday mornings and gets people to come and get grilled by us in front of everybody. There's other people with this group, but we have a very active office normally here that's been operating for a number of years. And one of the big things we've done is we published the salaries and pensions of all the teachers and especially the administrators in the whole state of Illinois for over 15 years. We've recently published a book on it called the Illinois Pension Scam. It's 301 pages of actually interesting reading. And we're going to have a copy of it come up the line right here. Thanks, Nick. But this thing's written by Bill Zettler. And if you want to know why Illinois is in the shape it is, you want to read this book. It's 301 pages, full of chapters. There's all kinds of interesting columns. If you're somebody who likes to read interesting columns, you don't have to. Crack this book anywhere and read that chapter. This is a short story book about what went on in the state, that the unions took $132 million from the dues of the teachers. 80% of that, according to the Beck decision, is gone for nothing but politics. So there's about $100 million a year that the IEA, the Illinois Education Association principally, has been spreading around to corrupt the whole political process in the state of Illinois and to run the pensions completely impractically, to the extent that the pension system in Illinois for teachers alone is about $160 billion in the hole. And that's been done by the strength of the unions, working with the Democrats in the downstate in the legislature. They have wrecked the whole thing, and the teachers will find that their biggest enemy is their own union, because it has bankrupted the state and it's bankrupted the pension system. And that's why we need new leaders in the state following along. So I'm going to sit down because I'm hungry too. And it's been a pleasure seeing you all here and to having you get a little taste of what I call the 10,000 cuts of the socialist system that we find in the regulations that are imposed on us. It's a long, long story, and it's what's holding down American business from being as grand as it should be under the American enterprise system. But thank you for coming.
Mr. Stephen Moore.
Thanks. Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Jack, a pleasure to be here. We just did the tour. What a fantastic place. I wanted to just talk for a few minutes. The reason I came today was I wanted to talk to Jack about what President Obama said the other day about "you didn't build that," which is one of the most offensive statements of any president in a long time, and is really an insult to so many of you in this room that started businesses. And so I wanted to interview Jack and ask him about his kind of views about what the president said, and he said he's an idiot. So I think I'll use that in the paper. But I wanted to just talk for a few minutes about what's going on with the economy, and then I really want to get I want to have a discussion with you all about where you think things are headed and how your businesses are doing and so on. So let me just start with the big picture. I work at the Wall Street Journal. I write for the editorial board. How many of you read the editorial page of the Journal? Thank you for reading it. It's the most important page of the paper. And you know, we're doing actually pretty well. The Journal, ever since Rupert Murdoch bought the Wall Street Journal, we've been doing really well financially. I think it was the best thing that ever happened to the Journal. In fact, Rupert Murdoch, we were a little nervous when he took over that a lot of people were nervous about whether he would want to change the editorial position of the paper. And I remember we had a breakfast with him a couple of years ago, and we said, Rupert, what do you think of the Journal editorial page? And he said, are you kidding? It's my caffeine in the morning. So we knew we were in good shape. By the way, of the 5 major newspapers in the country, just to give you a sense of this business, because as you know, the newspaper business is a very tough business these days. But of the 5 major newspapers in the country today, the Wall Street Journal, Washington Post, New York Times, LA Times, and the USA Today, of those 5 newspapers, only one of them is making money right now. Anybody want to take a guess at what paper that is? The Wall Street Journal.
Wall Street Journal.
So we're very pleased about that. In fact, I don't know how many of you looked at the New York Times finances lately, but they're about this close into being in federal bankruptcy court, and it just couldn't happen to a nicer group of people. So that's kind of the development in our business. And actually, you know, I do find this newspaper business a very interesting business because thanks to people like Jack Trotter, entrepreneurs, I think it's very likely that within 5 years, or maybe more likely in 10 years, there won't be newspapers. You know, there won't be conventional, and people are going to get their newspaper on this. And in fact, what we're finding is that already, you know, a larger and larger share of our readers every day. How many of you get your newspaper on your BlackBerry or your cell phone? You know, so already that trend is happening, especially with young people. Young people don't buy newspapers; they get it electronically. So the business is changing a lot, and you know, one of the challenges of our business is how do you make money, you know, on the internet? Because as you know, people feel like everything on the internet should be free, and so we're experimenting with charging with various kinds of pricing mechanisms and stuff, and so we'll see how that works out. Here is my quick take on the economy. First of all, I do believe, well, let me step back a minute. I want to talk about just two issues that are really high in my mind right now that I've been covering a lot for the Journal and very closely. And one is energy, and the second one is healthcare. And I know some of you in this room are in the healthcare field. On energy, I just wanted to just tell you very quickly about a trip I took about a month ago to North Dakota. I went to Williston, North Dakota, and what is going on in North Dakota today is unbelievable. It's like going back to the Wild West during the gold rush days. And as you know, it's because of the massive amounts of oil and natural gas that they found there on the Bakken Shale. And it is an incredible game changer in terms of energy. I mean, there is more oil in North Dakota than there is in Saudi Arabia, just to give you a sense of the scale of things. And a lot of this is being driven. One of the things I admire about Jack and so many of you in this room is that you're innovators and you're inventors. And one of the things that's changed about energy is because of this new process called hydraulic fracturing, which somehow the left has made this out like this is some kind of sinister technology. It is being against hydraulic fracturing is like being against a cure for cancer. It is an amazing technology that has almost overnight quadrupled the amount of energy that we have access to in this country. And just to cut to the chase here, because of what's going on in places like North Dakota, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma, Texas, California, we now, within the next 10 or 12 years, are going to be an energy exporting country, not an energy importing country. Now, that is an amazing thing to think about, but you just see how much oil we're producing. We're about 5 or 10 years ahead of the rest of the world in terms of the hydraulic fracturing process. It's just an incredible thing. And when you think about it, we import about $300 billion of oil every year because of, if we had the right energy policy in place, and we just went balls to the walls in terms of drilling for the resources we have. Not just oil and natural gas, by the way, is an amazing thing. I mean, we have 200 years worth of natural gas. Coal, we're incredibly rich in. We're the Saudi Arabia of coal in this country. So that's a big deal. I mean, we're going to see, in my opinion, over the next 10 years, reduced prices of energy, and we're going to see the United States exporting it rather than importing it. And that has a lot of implications, not just for our economy, but also our national security. I mean, if you think about where we get our oil today from, our energy, it comes from Saudi Arabia and Iran and Venezuela and countries like that that are hostile to the United States. So the energy picture is really bright. And all we need is a president in the White House who is in favor of domestic energy. And we're not going to get there through windmills and solar. I mean, those are not the energies of the future. The second thing I wanted to mention just very quickly was that I've been covering pretty closely is the Obamacare law. And this is going to affect everyone in this room's business, whether you're directly in the healthcare business or whether you're in manufacturing and engineering, whatever it might be. And let me just say this, I actually sat in on the oral arguments at the Supreme Court the first day, which was kind of a big thrill for me, sitting in the gallery. There was only about 100 people that were let in. And I felt very strongly after those oral arguments. I remember calling my boss after listening to the arguments that the justices were making and the questions they were asking to the Solicitor General and the State Attorney Generals. I said, I called my boss and said, Paul, we got this in the bag, because Justice Kennedy, who has been the swing vote on the court over every important decision for the last 20 years, was the one everybody thought he was going to make the decisive vote about whether this law would be overturned or not and be declared unconstitutional, especially the individual mandate requiring people to buy health insurance. And the tragedy of that decision, as you all know, was that actually it turned out that Kennedy was the strongest on this case, and he sided with us on this one. The one who obviously lost, as you all know, is Justice Roberts. And so we're stuck with this law right now. And one of the reasons this election is going to be so important, and I do believe that this is going to be maybe the most important election of our lifetime, maybe not as important as the 1980 election. I do believe that it would have been a disaster for our country if Jimmy Carter had been reelected. But this is a really big one, and it's a really big election because the ideas are so diametrically opposed. I mean, we really do have a president who believes this. I mean, he's saying that he was misquoted and that he didn't really believe, he was taken out of context. He wasn't taken out of context. That we have a president who really does believe that most of the wealth and most of the businesses in this country and most of what's productive is a result of government. And that's just a philosophy that this president and a lot of the Democrats have today. I'm not here to cheerlead for the Republicans. I have a lot of trouble with the Republicans as well. But I do think, if you listen to what Mitt Romney is saying, I mean, this is a guy, like so many of you in this room, who knows how to run a business, who knows how to turn a profit. He's a turnaround artist. He's not the world's greatest, as we were discussing. discovery. He's not the world's greatest candidate, but he is, I think, kind of what this country needs in terms of getting refocused on the free market. And one of the things I'd like to just express to you, and then I'll open it up to questions. I do believe that this U.S. economy is really prepped. I mean, I was talking to a couple of you earlier, we're chatting, you were making this point. I mean, I think that you are exactly right, that if you get this president out of the White House, if you get the community organized or community organizing again and not running the White House, and you put that glass of iced tea in the White House, I mean, I would take anything over what we have right now. I think the country is really prepped for a big expansion, a 1980s, 1990s type of expansion. You'll have a bull market expansion in the stock market. You're going to see businesses really expand. And the reason for that is quite simple. Right now, if you look at the statistics on what's going on with the U.S. economy, we've been writing a lot about this at the Journal, that there's about $1.5 trillion to $2 trillion of capital right now that is simply not being reinjected into the economy. It's basically sitting on the sideline. There is such a huge fear factor out there right now, and I talk to businessmen and women all the time and investors, and they say they're just not reinvesting because they're afraid. They're in a kind of in a cocoon right now, just trying to protect their principal. And by the way, a good indication of this fear factor is, as many of you have seen, the 10-year Treasury bill now is selling at a 1.4% interest rate, a 1.4 interest rate. Now think about that in the context of inflation right now. We have, in the U.S. economy right now, we have a 2.5 to 3% rate of inflation. This is something, as an economist, I've been doing this for 30 years. We used to say that this is impossible, it couldn't happen. But what we have right now in the United States, and not just the United States, a lot of the countries in the world, Germany, Sweden, is a negative real interest rates. So what that means is the people are buying these 10-year Treasury bills, and the government is promising them to pay back less money than they borrowed the money for 10 years from now. That is the height of risk aversion, right? People just want their principal protected. And my message, I think, to you this afternoon is, if you move towards a regime in Washington that is more pro-business and realizes the incredibly important role of entrepreneurs in building the economy, I think it gets reinjected really quickly. I think you're going to see the market take off. I think you're going to see employment come up at a very healthy pace. And the most important thing, and this is the final thing I'll mention, is I do think that the big issue that you're going to hear a lot about for the next 3 to 6 months, well, let's see, we're less than 100 days away now from the election, right? 99 days. The big issue that what this election is going to come down to is Obama is going to run a class warfare campaign. He's going to run against business. He's going to run against rich people. He's going to run against people productive who've made wealth, and basically try to pit the middle class against the wealthy. And that essentially is the strategy of this White House. I'll be very disappointed with the American people if they fall for that. One of the things that I think is so admirable about this country is that we are not a country that is being driven by greed and envy, but we're a country that is driven by aspiration. And people look at the Jack Rosens and others of this country, and they hold them up as heroes, not as villains. So. But this is all being manifested, obviously, in this big tax increase issue. You've been probably following this, the tax cliff. And I think that it is a major, major mistake for this president not to take this tax cliff off the table. As many of you know, starting on January 1st, we're looking at a big increase in the tax on small businesses. By the way, I don't even think we should call it the small business. We shouldn't call it the personal income tax. We should call it the small business tax, because that really is what it is for people who make over $250,000. Over half of the income the president wants to tax of these evil rich people, over half of that income is small business income that's declared on business forms. The capital gains tax goes up, the dividend tax goes up, the estate tax goes up. I mean, those are just killers for the economy. Nobody raises tax rates anymore. And if when you have the central problem in the U.S. economy right now, which is that businesses and individuals are not investing in the economy, and then you turn around and tell the investment class, oh, by the way, we're going to raise your capital gains tax and your dividend class, that's only going to lead to more capital being invested abroad and not here. So I think, finally, just in terms of who's going to win this election, I do think it's going to be a very close election. I think that Romney is going to win. And I think Romney is going to win not because he's a terrific candidate, but because I think for the American people, this election comes down to one issue when they walk in. And that's why all these TV ads and stuff that you're seeing, I don't know if you get many of them in Illinois because this is a pretty heavily Democratic state, but in these battleground states, and I live in one of them, Virginia, I mean, every time you turn on the TV, you're seeing a pro-Romney ad or a pro-Obama ad. They're not very good. They're just a lot of noise. I don't think anybody's paying attention to that, and I don't think it's going to make a whole heck of a lot of difference. The only issue I think that matters is when people walk into that voting booth on November 3rd, they're going to ask one question. Can we afford 4 more years of this? You know, can the country afford 4 more years? And I think, in my opinion, the answer to that question is pretty self-evident, especially when we had 1.5% growth last quarter. By the way, just one last point. You know, I compared in our editorial on Saturday the growth rate under Obamanomics at this stage of the recovery versus the growth rate under Ronald Reagan, because both of these presidents inherited great economic crises. Under Reagan, anybody want to take a guess at what the second quarter economic growth rate was in 1984? It wasn't 1.5%, 7.5%. 7.5%. So the economy was growing 4 to 5 times faster when we got the policies right. That's why I do think, you know, you get a president who understands markets in the White House, and I think we can see those kinds of very rapid rates of growth.